For over 12 years, from 1940 to 1952, I went to Tiruvannamalai at least once and sometimes twice a year during my school and later college holidays. Monica, Suzanne's daughter, writes, I loved the place. Our house was in the Street of Priests, as the big street was known. The sumptuous temple processions with their gold and silver images on their equally precious vehicles drawn on huge temple cars used to pass down the street on feast days, stopping in front of the houses of the chief high priests so that offering of the light or the arti might be made to the deities. I was never bored while in Tiruvannamalai, a town into which the life of the temple extended in many ways. Number 58 was similar to most of the neighboring houses. In front there was a wide veranda, part of which was covered by a thatched roof. On this veranda there were stone benches for sitting and enjoying the cool early morning hours or the balmy evening breezes. The massive carved wooden front door opened with a key about 30 centimeters long. One entered into a short passage with rooms to the right and left, which Suzanne used for her dispensary. After them came two more rooms that served as our bedrooms when it was not possible for us to sleep on the flat terrace roof above. The passage opened into a large hall divided into three sections by two rows of carved pillars, painted a bright primitive blue, the same demon-repelling blue that one saw in the temple. Right at the top of the hall there were small barred windows which gave on to the roof above, and often the monkeys, which used to travel in families from one rooftop to the next on their way from the forest to the hill, would peer down inquisitively at us through the windows. In this hall, in the left-hand side section between the wall and the first row of pillars, we had placed a piano and some bookshelves. In the central section, a settee, some armchairs, and a small round table to create a drawing room. And in the last section, a plain dining table and chairs. It was quite a different scene in the houses of the neighboring high priests and their families, for from choice, not necessity, they contained practically no furniture nor any decoration, not even on the walls, which were bare except for the customary row of sacred pictures. On the far side of our hall, a door led to the back of the house, where, surrounded by a veranda, there was an inner courtyard that was open to the sky, in the middle of which there grew a sacred tulsi plant. The open courtyard was a replica on a small scale of the big enclosures in the Lord Arunachalaswara temple, keeping with the religious architectural principle of all-encompassing, within earthen walls, the infinite expanse of Brahman. Hence our house was built to be a house of the open, a house of pure space, which is what the Maharshi once called the heart. In the small back garden there were fresh-smelling plants such as latana, as well as jasmine and passion flower, no doubt planted by a former tenant to provide the offerings for the daily pujas to the household gods. There were also plantain trees, useful not only for their fruit, but also for their supply of leaf plates, which, being fresh at every meal, ensured both hygiene and purity, which was required by caste Hindus. Wildlife in the form of small black pigs would occasionally make an appearance, squeezing under the back gate and scurrying around the garden, intent on their own pursuits. Formerly, deer and bears and even elephants used to roam freely around Arunachala, as the medieval Pariya Puranam relates. But since those days, many wild animals have disappeared. There were, however, still cheetahs and leopards, and once someone brought a leopard cub to the dispensary to consult Suzanne on how to rear it. Its mother had been shot by government hunters because leopards from the forest had taken to attacking the lorries plying on the Chengam Road, one of the main commercial arteries of the town. Beyond our back gate, it was open country. Nearby, just outside the town limits, there was a hillock topped by an aboriginal village. At certain times of the year, its inhabitants would celebrate the cult of the ancient mother goddess. All night long there would be the drum beating and ritual dancing that probably ended in mediumistic prophecy. In the morning, the image of the deity would be taken in a small procession to a pond for immersion. A youth bearing the image on his head and believing himself possessed by the goddess's spirit would dance in ecstatic abandon down the big street, followed rather helter-skelter by the other celebrants. The Brahmin priests, reading their newspapers on their front verandas, would look up cursorily as India made the self and small defiant parade of its cult before them, their Aryan conquerors. Upstairs on the terrace of our house there was only one small room which, situated next to the stairs, must have corresponded to the first floor room in the house in Tiruchuli, where Venkataraman attained self-realization. Suzanne used the room for meditation. It was there that she spent whatever free time she had. Although she lived as a householder, at heart she was still a homeless wanderer, sincerely detached from material comforts. Often the only occupant of our drawing room downstairs was one of her patients, an elderly lady who sat with stiff dignity on the settee for an hour or so, because Suzanne believed her health would only improve if she could get away for a time from the family environment. When Suzanne was upstairs, I would come up to be with her, occupying myself with reading or writing, or else practicing on the terrace the ballet steps she had taught me. Or I would try to acquire the skill of dowsing with the help of a divining rod and a container of water. This came so easily to Suzanne, but I showed not the slightest talent for it. I was occasionally watched with some interest by the young Brahmin woman on the opposite rooftop, where she stayed during her unclean days of the month, by tradition not allowed to enter the house properly where the household deities were kept. Weather permitting, we slept outside the meditation room in the open. As we lay on our beds, the mosquito nets would billow out in the breeze like the sails of a boat. The distinctive smell of old stone, incense, and burning oil reached us from the temple, as did the sounds that accompany the pujas, the bursting of firecrackers and the music of ritual instruments that rose in a crashing crescendo as the moment of God's manifestation approached. There were pujas for different moments in the deity's day, from the early morning awakening through the bathing, feeding, to the twilight worship at the time of the putting to rest at night. God was here among his people, and the divine life could be felt by his worshippers to be intertwined with their own. The huge temple complex, covering about 10 hectares, was only one street away from us. Of its 3 enclosures, the innermost contained the small original 10th century temple, which was now the Holy of Holies. The temple complex had grown over the centuries, and the outermost enclosure, which had the highest gopuras or gate towers, had been added in the 16th and 17th century. Of these, it was the north-facing gopura which faced our house. Unlike the others, it did not carry the multitude of otherworldly beings that usually figure on those pyramidal edifices representing Mount Meru, the mythical mountain that rises from earth to heaven. Instead, it displayed orderly rows of empty niches or miniature pavilions, heavens, empty mansions, so to speak. I do not know whether the construction had been halted due to war or the failing finances of kings, but the empty spaces seem to state that even when there are no visible forms, the principles of order and organization that underlie them and make appearance possible are always present in the cosmos. A Dravidian gopura rises tier upon tier, like the different stages of spiritual practice, the gods and goddesses they carry representing the powers and qualities attained at each stage. Above the last tier there is a vimana, a curious tubular structure carved to resemble the bamboo roof of the antique predecessor of the temple, the shed of initiation where man met God. Apparently, it is simply to preserve the memory of the place of the highest meeting that the vimana has been raised to its elevated position, since it serves no other purpose in the Gopura. Surmounting the roof of the Ramana on either side are the great solar faces of glory, or faces. The sight of those solar signs high in the sky recall the Maharshi's words when he said, "The sun of realization shining in the sky of mind," which is how he described the state of consciousness attained at the summit of one's spiritual ascent. And above all, the hill towered above both city and temple. Our house at the upper end of the big street was very close, and we were familiar with its appearance at every moment of the day, in every season of the year. We went to sleep in its deep protective presence. We woke to see Arunachala in the lustral morning air when it glowed red like the dawn, Aruna, which is its name. By midday, as the sun reached its zenith, the hill became dazzlingly white in the intense heat, unbearable to look upon with the naked eye. During the rains, its sides flowed with copious streams of grace. On some monsoon nights, I have seen the hill stand thrillingly tall, withdrawn and mysterious behind a great swirling mantle of white mist, hemmed with pale opals by the lights of the passing traffic.